February 24, 2022 feels just like yesterday. It was on this day that Russia invaded Ukraine. Every Western expert had something to say, some complex reasoning to give. And most of them used one common line. They said it's Europe's first conflict since World War II, or the first attack on European sovereignty since 1945. You may remember some of that commentary. But last year, at the United Nations, one leader disputed it. He said, hold on. Yes, Ukraine is going through a tough time, but it's not the first European war since 1945. That leader was Alexander Vučić. He is the president of Serbia.
Many say that this was the first conflict on the European soil after the World War II. But the truth that the territorial integrity of a country in Europe, Serbia, as a matter of fact, which did not attack any other sovereign country, was violated, is constantly unspoken.
Which war is he talking about? You won't see many memorials about it, nor will you hear calls for accountability, because this war was waged by NATO and the victim was Serbia, or as it was called then, Yugoslavia. In 1999, NATO bombed the country into the Stone Age. Soldiers, civilians and children were all killed. In one blow, NATO broke a country apart. How and why did they do it? Time for a flashback. Let me show you a map of Europe. We'll zoom into this part in the southeast. It's called the Balkans. At the end of World War II, this area was one country, the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. It was a union of 6 different nationalities: Serbia, Montenegro, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Croatia, North Macedonia, and Slovenia. All 6 are independent countries now. But in 1946, they were one. Here in India, we say there is unity in diversity. Not in Yugoslavia, though. Their diversity was more aggressive and volatile. Until 1991, this wasn't much of a problem. It was a communist country, so diversity or not, you kept your mouth shut. But in 1991, communism fell across Eastern Europe. Suddenly, there was nothing to suppress Yugoslavia's ethnic tensions. So this is what happened. The country split. Bosnia, Croatia, Slovenia, and Macedonia left. But Serbia and Montenegro did not. They became the new Yugoslavia. Around this time, another internal conflict was brewing. This involved Kosovo. Now, Kosovo was a Serbian province. If you ask Serbians, they will say it's the heart of their nationhood. But by the mid-1990s, Kosovo had new residents, Albanian Muslims, and they began asking for independence. But Serbia's president would have none of it. This man, Slobodan Milosevic. At first, the Kosovan struggle was non-violent, but in 1996, the KLA was set up. Their strategy was quite simple. If diplomacy and peace won't work, let's fight this out. The KLA has been accused of multiple war crimes like kidnappings, riots, arson, even murders and summary executions. As the violence spread, Serbia cracked down. If you thought the KLA was bad, well, Serbia was worse. World powers did try to stop this madness. The West and Russia created something called the Contact Group. Now, they had 4 proposals: immediate ceasefire, the withdrawal of Serbian soldiers, return of all refugees, and full access to international monitors. Milosevic agreed to most of this. Yet, violence continued. The Kosovo Liberation Army used the ceasefire to regroup. When they attacked, Serbia hit back. It was bloody and ruthless violence. During all this time, the United Nations Security Council was on the job. It condemned Yugoslavia. It also imposed an arms embargo on the country. It also called for talks with Albanians. But NATO was not satisfied. They wanted to do more. In October 1998, the alliance issued a threat to Yugoslavia: stop the violence or face air strikes. Milosevic was spooked. He agreed to stop the offensive. But next year, in 1999, the violence resumed. Some last-ditch talks were held in France. The Albanian side was ready to strike a deal, but Milosevic was not. He moved more soldiers and tanks into Kosovo. The choice was now NATO's, and they chose violence. On March 24th, the airstrikes began. They continued for almost 3 months, 78 days to be precise. It was called Operation Allied Force. NATO pilots flew 38,000 sorties. Out of them, more than 10,000 were for airstrikes. The brutality is in the numbers. NATO dropped around 420,000 bombs on Yugoslavia. This included 15 tons of depleted uranium bombs and cluster munitions, the same ones that are now banned by 123 countries. NATO used them liberally in the year 1999. Did the United Nations sanction any of this? Of course not. Neither did the Security Council approve of it. NATO unilaterally decided to intervene. They wanted to teach Milosevic a lesson. Nothing was spared in the bombing. Bridges, hospitals, schools, embassies, factories, everything was fair game. Around 1,000 Yugoslav soldiers were killed along with 500 civilians. Serbia says the number is much higher, around 2,500 fatalities. Later reports confirmed violations of international humanitarian laws. Guess how many NATO officials were held accountable for all of this? 0. In fact, they actively hid their war crimes. I have a story for you. In April 1999, NATO struck a railway bridge in Yugoslavia. They hit a passenger train. Around 20 people were killed, all of them civilians. A US general apologized for this mistake. He showed everyone a video of the bombing. He said the train was traveling too fast. Apparently, there was no time to divert the bomb. People said okay and moved on. But as it turned out, the general lied. NATO had doctored the bombing video. It was shown at 3 times the normal speed, that train. Why? So it would seem like the train was going too fast. And no one took the fall for this lie. The US called it a technical error. And the general? He retired as a decorated 4-star officer, even ran for president in the year 2004. This was the reality of NATO's war. In the end, their troops entered and occupied Kosovo. They established Kosovan autonomy. Even today, there is a NATO contingent there. And what happened to Milosevic? He had no chance against NATO. So he ended up agreeing to their peace terms. Kosovo remained part of Serbia, but with autonomy. He was toppled by the people next year. He would go on to be charged with war crimes. In 2006, Milosevic was found dead inside his prison cell. And Yugoslavia? It was renamed in 2003 to Serbia and Montenegro. 2 years later, both countries split away. Thus ended the century-long story of Yugoslavia. It remains a controversial chapter in history. Was NATO right in bombing the Serbians? They say Milosevic was preparing for a genocide. No doubt he was a war criminal. But why bomb civilians for that? Why attack radio stations and schools for that? NATO calls itself a defensive military alliance, but there was nothing defensive about those 3 months in 1999. It was pure and lethal offense. In 2001, a United Nations court ruled that there was no genocide in Kosovo. War crimes, yes, but genocide, no. The fact is, NATO chose this path. In 1994, there was genocide in Rwanda. NATO was not bothered then. In 1999, Russia attacked Chechnya. Again, NATO was not bothered, but with Serbia, they chose violence. Something similar happened during the Second World War. America dropped 2 nuclear bombs on Japan. The war was pretty much over by then, so why use nuclear bombs? The US says it prevented further bloodshed. Sure, but at what cost? The lives of 200,000 innocent Japanese people. My point is an old one. History has been written by victors. So nobody questions the nuclear attacks on Japan or the ruthless bombing of Yugoslavia. Only the victims remember. And NATO? Well, they moved from one war crime to another. After Yugoslavia, NATO went on to Afghanistan. More crimes, more justifications. As you see pictures from the latest NATO summit in Lithuania, remember that. This is an alliance of sophisticated men and women, but their hands are bloody with innocent blood.